Okay, let's talk about something that honestly sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie. The race to build artificial intelligence for warfare. But the really tricky part isn't just building it, it's trying to control it. And as we're about to see, the world is seriously struggling to agree on the rules, and that's getting dangerous fast. All right, get a load of this. This chart right here tells a really startling story. Not that long ago, you had 60 countries all signing on to a global plan for military AI. Sounds good, right? But at the most recent summit, whoa, that number just plummeted down to 35. That's not just a small drop, that's a total collapse in consensus, and it is a huge red flag. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's who isn't signing. This isn't about smaller nations sitting on the sidelines. We're talking about the heavyweights, the United States, China, and India. All of them are opting out. When the biggest players in AI and military power refuse to get on board, it's not just an absence, it's a statement. So what is really going on here? Well, that question brings us right to the heart of the matter, the governance challenge. Turns out, trying to put rules on military AI is incredibly difficult for some very, very fundamental reasons. It all starts with this core problem. AI is what's known as a dual-use technology. What that means is the exact same code that could be used to optimize a logistics company's supply chain could also be used to coordinate a swarm of attack drones. And because these civilian and military tracks are often developed in parallel, it creates this massive headache for anyone trying to regulate it. And you can see that problem laid out perfectly right here. The AI managing logistics for, say, an online retailer on the left isn't all that different from the AI managing military logistics on the right. This huge overlap makes it nearly impossible to verify if a country's AI research is for peaceful purposes or for something else entirely, until it's way too late. There's also a bit of a historical pattern at play here. Nations are always reluctant to limit any technology they see as a potential game changer. Something that could give them a huge military advantage. And right now, AI is seen as the ultimate game changer. Nobody wants to be the one to fall behind in this race. But the biggest issue, the real elephant in the room, is the debate over something called laws, which stands for Lethal Autonomous Weapon Systems. We are talking about weapons that could, potentially, make their own life or death decisions on the battlefield, entirely on their own, with no human in the loop pulling the trigger. And this brings us right to the core of the global deadlock. The world can't agree on regulations because of one single frustrating problem. They can't even agree on what exactly they're trying to regulate. So it all boils down to this one question. What is a laws? I mean, is it a smart missile that finds its own way to a target? Is it a defensive system that fires automatically? Or is it a full-on sci-fi robot soldier? Well, it turns out the answer completely depends on who you ask. Okay, let's break this down. You've got your technologically advanced countries, right? They're pushing for a really high threshold, basically saying a weapon is only autonomous if it can operate for weeks without any human contact. Why? Because it gives them more freedom to develop new tech. Then you have states with less AI investment. They want a super restrictive definition to push for a ban, arguing any weapon that selects a target on its own is autonomous. And then you have this third group who just keep their definitions vague to avoid being limited. See the problem? Everyone is defining the term to fit their own goals. And the results of all this definitional chaos? Total paralysis. The main UN group that's supposed to be handling this has been rendered completely ineffective. They've met over and over, but they failed to produce a single concrete recommendation. The international community is quite literally stuck in a gridlock. Now, to see how all this abstract stuff plays out in the real world, let's zoom in on India. Its very calculated position on AI is a perfect case study of this whole global dilemma. So India is playing this really delicate balancing act. On one hand, it has a massive economic push for AI development. On the other, it has very real security concerns in its region. So what does it do? It calls any legally binding treaty premature. It avoids signing big declarations because that might slow down its own progress. Instead, it gets behind these broad, kind of vague ideas like the need for responsible use, which sounds good but doesn't really commit them to anything. It keeps all their options open. So, given this global gridlock and all this strategic caution, is there any way forward? Is there a path out of this mess? Well, instead of shooting for a perfect but frankly impossible treaty, some folks are now proposing a much more pragmatic first step. The new proposal is basically to shift gears entirely. Forget the rigid, all-or-nothing treaty for now. The idea is to start with something looser, more flexible, a non-binding framework. The goal here isn't immediate enforcement. It's about building trust and establishing some shared norms, sort of a foundation that you could maybe build a real treaty on later. And this framework would basically stand on three key pillars. First, an absolute non-negotiable red line. No AI making autonomous decisions about nuclear weapons. Period. Second, creating voluntary ways for countries to share data just to build a little confidence and transparency. And third, since we can't agree on what laws are, let's just create a shared risk hierarchy, agreeing on which AI uses are low risk, like logistics, and which are super high risk, like autonomous targeting. As we start to wrap this up, we have to accept a pretty stark reality here. The use of AI in the military is no longer a question of if, it's a question of when and how. The technology is just moving too fast, and the perceived advantages are just too great for anyone to stop it completely. Because of that, the entire focus of the global conversation really has to shift. It can't be about trying for some kind of outright ban anymore. Instead, the urgent pressing task is to make sure that the right guardrails, the right rules, the right norms are put in place to manage this future that is, let's face it, already here. And that leaves us with the big final question, doesn't it? In a world of intense competition and technology that's growing exponentially, are these voluntary, trust-based frameworks really going to be enough to steer the future of warfare in a safe direction? The answer is far from certain, and the stakes couldn't possibly be higher. Thanks for joining me.